Hello, everyone. Welcome. It's nice to see all of your faces here today. My name is Scarlett Van Berkel. I am a first-generation settler here on Turtle Island, whose family immigrated here from the island of Jamaica, the land of wood and water. I belong to the waters of the Caribbean Sea, and I'm here at University of Waterloo in my first year of a master's program with the School of Environment Resources and Sustainability, and studying social and ecological sustainability and the 11th cohort of the Collaborative Water Program. I'd like to extend a special welcome to the students and teachers from the Six Nations Polytechnic and Pauline Johnson Collegiate and Vocational School. It's an honor to share this time and space with you all, and to have the opportunity to listen and learn from so many people who are advocating and dedicated to the protection of water. A few housekeeping announcements before we begin today. In case of emergency, please proceed to the closest marked exit and gather in parking lot R, which is that way. If you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out to one of our student volunteers. You'll see them around the room in the navy blue shirts. Most pressingly, I'd like to begin with a territorial acknowledgement on behalf of the University of Waterloo and the Water Institute. The University of Waterloo acknowledges that much of our work takes place on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. Our main campus is situated on the Haldeman Tract, the land granted to the Six Nations that includes 6 miles on each side of the Grand River. Our active work towards reconciliation takes place across our campuses through research, learning, teaching, and community building, and is coordinated with the Office of Indigenous Relations. The land I work on is covered by the Between the Lakes Treaty No. 3 from 1792, and this region is still home to First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people from across Turtle Island. I am grateful to have the opportunity to work, play, rest, and live on this land, and acknowledge that it is our collective responsibility to make our community and world a better place for all people. I recognize the systemic inequities that stem directly from past wrongdoings, and I commit to respecting and working towards reconciling this history of injustice. Please join me in welcoming my co-host and co-facilitator for today, Savannah Sloat, Manager of Indigenous Science Initiatives.
Sego, how's everybody doing this morning? I know we're technically in spring now, but it's snowing, so that's always a good time. My name's Savannah Sloat. I work here in the Faculty of Science. I'm also a proud member of Six Nations. I'm Tuscarora Nation, born in Brantford actually, and raised in community, and very happy to be here at the University of Waterloo, supporting Indigenous science. Scarlett and I will be your co-hosts today for this event. And so I'm happy to welcome you to the University of Waterloo and here to our piece of the Grand River Territory. Thank you for being here. I would also like to invite Melissa Ireland, the Director of the Office of Indigenous Relations, to give a welcome to all of our guests here. So please join me in welcoming Melissa.
Minukijab, Inibojo, Wabske Benasikwe, Indishnakas, Wabshoshido Dem, Curvlake Donjaba, Waterloo and Diane. Hi everyone, my name is Melissa Ireland. I am from Curve Lake First Nation. I'm so happy to be here today to join you. One thing that I also want to acknowledge is I am a member of the Williams Treaty First Nation, Nations in the Williams Treaty. And as I was reflecting on that, I noticed on this map, I saw treaties identified on Canada here on this map. So if you have a chance today, come and take a look at this beautiful map, because there's really beautiful acknowledgements of the treaties that are on this nation. So today I was reflecting, just to bring people together and gather today in a good mind. I wanted to welcome everybody to the University of Waterloo. I've sent greetings from the Office of Indigenous Relations, and I'm so glad that you're here. It's a very special day today, and upon reflection, I thought, what could I offer in terms of opening for World Water Day? And I would like to share a song that was taught to me. This was taught to me by Tina Armstrong from Red Lake First Nation, and it's one of the water songs that I hold. So I'd like to offer this to you. Nibi wabo endayan, aki miske wabo. Way ahe ahe ahe, way ahe ahe ahe. Nibi wabo endayan, aki miske wabo. Way ahe ahe ahe, way ahe ahe ahe. Nibi wabo endayan, aki miske wabo. Way ahe ahe ahe, way ahe ahe ahe. Nibi wabo endayan, aki miske wabo. Way ahe ahe ahe, way ahe ahe aho. Oh my gosh. I know the theme is water today on World Water Day. We'll have some fabulous speakers. I'm seeing some beautiful activities, some amazing work by students. I hope you have a beautiful day and you have an open heart and an open mind for learning. Miigwech.
Yawa, Melissa, thank you. Amazing. What a beautiful way to start, and thank you for the gift of your song. Today we're sitting in as much of a circle as I could get Fed Hall to organize. You will notice we have this beautiful water map, as Melissa pointed out, as well for folks. We're going to run this as much as a circle as we're able to. So typically when we're learning together in the lodge, we're in circle together, we're in community. And for Haudenosaunee people, we talk about coming with good intention and being on the path of the good mind with one another. And so this morning, we want you to think about what it means to walk in a good way and to have a good mind. And we really want to focus on being in community with each other. So Scarlett and I will be co-facilitating, as I mentioned. Also, because we are on Haudenosaunee territory and I'm Haudenosaunee, we'll be going the Haudenosaunee way, which is counterclockwise, or to the right. As we like to say, and all my Anishinaabe friends are laughing at me right now, we go the right way and everyone goes the other way. So our circle will be going counterclockwise today. So we'll be helping to walk you through that. Before we introduce Autumn, who I know everyone is super excited to see today, we're actually going to be showing her short film, The Water Walker. The Water Walker is the first project from Seeing Red, Six Nations. It stars teenage climate activist Autumn Peltier, who is Anishinaabe Kwe from Wikwemukong First Nation on Manitoulin Island. The film is narrated by Academy Award-nominated actor Graham Greene, who is Oneida from Six Nations of the Grand River. The Water Walker is a short documentary tracing the roots, passion, and perseverance of young Autumn. We follow her story as she prepares to speak at the United Nations. Autumn is an influential figure in the Indigenous and global youth-led environmental movement. In 2019, 14-year-old Autumn was named the Chief Water Commissioner by the Anishinaabe Nation, a position previously held by her late great-aunt Josephine Mandamin, an elder and founding member of the Water Protectors movement. Adding to the richness of the storytelling, the filmmakers incorporate Michif, or Métis artist Christy Belcourt's renowned paintings, brought to life with stunning animated sequences that capture the sacred qualities of water. So we're going to watch that film together, and then I will gladly introduce Autumn. So please enjoy the film, everyone.
There's an on button, I think. What a beautiful film, and can you please just join us in welcoming Autumn Peltier here today? It's such an honor to be to be in your company and to be able to have a conversation with you today. So we do have a few questions for you, Autumn, and thank you for being here. We do have a few student volunteers who received a few questions that came in ahead of time. And so, as Savannah mentioned, we're going to move around the circle in this direction. So if you're one of the volunteers who did receive a question, starting from the right, moving around the circle to the left, can you just identify yourselves just by raising your hand? Wonderful. Okay, awesome. So I guess we'll start on this side here, and I see Lauren. Hi, Lauren. If you can, there's a mic, if we don't mind just passing that over, and then we also have some mics stationed around the room, if that's more accessible for you.
Hi, thanks so much for being here. My name's Lauren, and I was just wondering, where do you see yourself in 20 years, and what is your dream for the future?
Well, 20 years from now, of course, I can't really tell the future, so I don't necessarily know the exact answer for that, but I do definitely see myself, still creating change, doing what I can on a daily basis to be a better person, and doing what I can on a daily basis to actively create change and keep up, the good work and helping educate and support others and using their voices as well. But yeah, I always say that you never really know where you're going to be, and I never really knew that I would be where I am today. So it's you can't really exactly say where you will be, but I do hope to be alive, because, you never really know. I may not be here in 20 years, but I hope to still be doing the same things that I'm doing and still trying to create the same impact that I am today.
Thank you.
We're going to keep moving around the circle. So I saw some hands before. Oh, right there. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you very much. My name is Batu. So what would you like to share with the youth that are joined with us today? And what do you hope that they take away from meeting you and being here today? Thank you.
My answer is going to sort of reflect what I just shared in saying you never really know where you're going to be, and how I never really had the intention to be where I am today, but I did have the intention to use my voice and speak up and do whatever I could, whatever was in my power in that very moment. And when I first started to share my thoughts and use my voice, I never I never really knew where I would end up. And so that's the power of just using your voice and just doing it and not really thinking about it and just doing what you can, whether it's little or small. It's as long as you're doing something, and it doesn't matter what you're doing, but you're using your voice and you're doing whatever effort you can take. So
It's really inspiring and really profound. I feel like it takes so much courage to show up and to use your voice and to be an advocate. So that's great advice. I think we see Thomas in the back with a question.
Hello. How do you navigate the complexities of balancing water and environmental sustainability with other important issues such as cultural preservation, inequities, economic disparities, and Indigenous collaboration?
well, a part of my work has been learning that it's not just water issues that affect Indigenous people, and it's much more than that. That includes racism, discrimination, and of course the water issues. So just learning about those things and being able to help educate other people who don't know about those issues, or helping other people understand, is kind of how I balance it. But there really is no balance in between all of them, because they all are very complex issues. But just knowing that I'm doing what I can to make a positive change in each of those sectors and aspects is kind of I guess how you can say I balance it. But yeah, it's kind of people have a negative view of when you talk about Indigenous issues, and it's not necessarily always negative. They expect it to have so much baggage that comes with it, but it's also positive. So looking at these things in a positive aspect is also super important, because not all of it's negative. I come to these spaces to help create positive change, create positive thinking, and help people lead with positive minds. And so it's not necessarily something that you should take as negative or just talk about negatively. So just remembering that there also is positive aspects to talking about these issues.
Thank you. I feel like the interrelationship there between kind of the Indigenous worldview and our relationship to water is so important. And I appreciate what you said about folks expecting a lot of these concerns to come with kind of baggage and tied to the history, but recognizing that we're still here and our cultures and communities are very much thriving. And really, I think that's an important thing to highlight, and appreciate you sharing that. We'll keep moving around the circle. I saw another hand over here. Hi.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. It was wonderful. I was just wondering, in terms of changing the world, you talked about youth, but do girls and women in particular have a space that needs to be filled in that area?
Well, in conversations specifically regarding water, women do have a very special role regarding the importance and sacredness of water, because in Anishinaabe culture, Ojibwe teachings, we learn that women are water carriers and that we give life, and that's our importance because we literally carry life in water for 9 months. And every single one of you have been born from water. Without water, none of us would be here. And so, like, that's the significance of being born an Anishinaabe woman, because being born Anishinaabe, you're automatically given the role and responsibility to be caretakers of the land and the water, the people, the animals, the medicine. And so, being a water carrier specifically, we have that automatic responsibility to advocate for the water, talk about the sacredness of it, and teach other people about the sacredness of it and the importance of it and why we should respect it. And so, being born a woman, an Anishinaabe woman, we have the specific responsibility of sharing and the importance of sacredness of water.
That's a really beautiful point. And on your other topic of working in concert with like all these different sectors, I think that's one of the beautiful things about the Collaborative Water Program and being here today and learning in community and in conversation and highlighting like the beautiful aspects of culture. Do we have any more questions over here?
Hi, thank you very much for your beautiful presentation. What can Indigenous knowledge teach us about sustainability for the generations to come, and how can we apply Indigenous knowledge and wisdom in today's modern world?
Well, that kind of also reflects my answer to like why water is so important for women, because again, being born in Anishinaabe, we're automatically given that right responsibility to be caretakers of the land and water. And so we automatically have that respect for it. We look at it in a perspective where we need to respect it, we need to advocate for it, and we need to educate other people about this perspective that we share. And so looking at it in that perspective, you have that utmost respect for it, and you have that much more care for it. And you know, when you look at it as something that gives life and you look at it as something that's sacred, you want to protect it. And so looking at it in that perspective is kind of like a perspective that I believe that everyone should have, because you know, we all live on this land, we all come from it, and we all come from water. And so without it, none of us would be here. No matter what our race or color is or how rich or poor we are, we all need water. So it's, you know, we all need to like collectively have the same like understanding and perspective on it.
I would love that, Benny. Thank you, yes.
Goi, hello. Hi, Autumn. I just first and foremost want to say thank you. My people are island people from both of the people that I come from, so water is extremely important to us as well. It's a strong connection. I'm also an activist in a different space, but I was wondering, you know, for all the people who are here right now, you know, we're kind of peppering Autumn with questions, and it can get really taxing and it can get really tiring. And even though you're so passionate about the work, it's really easy to get burnt out, which is really difficult to navigate when you're so passionate and so sacredly connected to something. And so I was wondering, what do you do to protect your peace and to care for yourself? I think that's a really nice lesson. I know that there's a lot of really passionate people here in the room, and if you're gonna do this kind of good work, it's really important to make sure you're taking care of yourself as well. So I'm just curious about that.
Well, I actually do quite a few things to manage and balance my well-being and mental health, and that includes first and foremost spending time with my family and ensuring that I have close peers or family with me at all times. I never really travel without someone that's either my family or my friend. For example, I have family sitting in the very front row, and so it's very important to like keep yourself grounded with family and peers. That's one of the main things that I do, and I also found like activities that like help me like manage stress, or when I feel like I need to escape or, escape my reality, I need to like go and do things. And I love working out. I've, within the last 3 years, discovered bodybuilding, and I'm actually a bodybuilder. And that's like one of the main things that I love doing. I love weightlifting, and so that's kind of the way I found be able to escape when I feel super overwhelmed or stressed. And I have a cat. His name is Mosca, which means mad in Ojibwe. And, it's very important to have animals, and he's one of the main things that help me stay grounded and balance my mental health. So,
Waylalan, thank you.
I think that's a really great point. I feel like a lot of the things that you do to keep your mental health sustained are some practices that I definitely have learned to tune into throughout the years. So thank you for sharing that. Do we have any other questions moving around the circle over here?
Yeah, so here we go. I wanted to ask, you talked about your family being here and the people that support you. I wanted to ask how you've been inspired by previous generations, whether that's your elders or your ancestors, and how that impacts your activism and the way you go about what you do.
well, one of the main things I reflect on when doing my work is that my ancestors prayed for the things that I'm doing today. And I feel like I'm living in the reality of what my ancestors prayed for. And so they prayed for our resilience and to keep our culture alive, our language alive. So consistently practicing my culture, educating other people is one of the ways that I am influenced by my ancestors and past generations. And that's kind of one of the main things I guess I could answer that question with.
Thank you for sharing that. I think our family connections and those relationships are so important and impactful. And we think often about our connections to others. Similarly, in the way when we're talking about water or other than human beings, we think about our connections to them and our relationships with them, and centering that is how we move forward in this work. So it's beautiful. Thank you. I saw some other folks around the circle here. I see one of our volunteers there running the mic. Thank you.
Test. Thank you very much. Autumn, I'm wondering if you could tell us if you're currently taking any studies, and what about those studies increases your passion.
I feel like I'll start that question by answering, I started my work talking about water, and specifically water rights and the issues surrounding water in First Nations communities, but I was 8 years old when I started, and that's the only knowledge I had at the time. But I'm now 19, turning 20 years old, so it's of course been a very long time since then. And in that amount of time, I've learned that it's not just water issues that impact Indigenous people. There's so much to it: racism, discrimination, missing a murdered Indigenous woman. And so I'm currently studying criminology right now. It's not necessarily what anybody would really expect, but I grew a passion for advocating for missing and murdered Indigenous women and justice and for equality. And so I'm currently studying criminology, and I aim to enhance my efforts regarding missing and murdered Indigenous women and be able to work in that sector of Indigenous rights.
Question over here.
Okay, can you hear me? Good. So I guess this connects to what you were mentioning about starting your advocacy work at the age of 8. So I wanted to ask, what role do youth have in, you have been heard telling youth that you too have a voice. Could you expand on what you mean by this? Potentially, what are some ways that youth can be heard by policymakers?
I feel like I'm going to turn this question around, actually ask the audience what they would do if they knew that there was a policymaker in the room right now. Would you guys use your voice? Would you guys speak up and share? So that's kind of my answer. I would do that too. And so there's no really exact answer for what exactly to do. There's not a step-by-step follow as to how to get to making change. It's really you just do whatever you believe is advocacy to you. Whatever you believe is what your efforts are, that's what you do. And, being an ally is so important. So just being an ally, even if you're not the one speaking up, just supporting people, because you're an ally through your actions and behaviors. So just supporting someone who is, speaking up, even if you can't or don't want to, that's okay. But just, just being an ally, educating other people, and, using your voice whenever possible, no matter how little or big it is.
Thank you. I think that one of the interesting things you point out there is our respect for youth in Indigenous communities and the way that we see them as so valuable and important. And I'm speaking from a Haudenosaunee perspective, and we come from a consensus-building community. And for us, true consensus means that everyone has a voice, including our elders and our youth, and that's for everyone. And so we hope that to encourage folks to be able to feel comfortable advocating for what they need. So I appreciate you kind of asking folks to maybe think about that and center that as we're talking about it, is how could you use your voice, or how will you use your voice going forward? Thank you. We have a question over here.
Hi, thank you so much for what you do. And being in the collaborative water program has been an eye-opener for me, and seeing what is really happening around the world. I come from a region where access to clean water is a problem, water pollution is a problem, and nothing is being done. So I have this passion to do something about it, but I don't even know where to start because it's huge and nobody is doing anything. And so I don't know. I don't know what to start, but where to start, but I want to do something about it.
Yes, to reflect on that, I talk about how this is an Indigenous issue and how this regards Indigenous rights, but really it's a human rights issue. This is an issue that not only affects Indigenous people, this affects people globally. And in terms of using your voice and not knowing where to start, neither did I. I started writing speeches for my school and talking in my classroom and with my peers. And I started writing letters to members of parliament and different, political figures like Justin Trudeau or the Queen of England. I've got responses from all of them, actually, as a matter of fact. And so, you can really use your voice in any aspect you really want to. Even social media, we live in a generation where social media is so dominant. And so just using your social media platforms and speaking out wherever you can, whenever you can, doesn't have to be a political figure. Just, helping share your thoughts and ideas with people, that's your first step. And just starting that conversation is the first step. So it's kind of my advice.
Thank you, Autumn. I feel like you really highlight an important piece about advocacy and about making change in the world, which is community. Oftentimes it can feel so daunting thinking about how to manage and how to handle these large-scale global problems. And it really does start with having those conversations with your neighbor, with your family, with your best friends. And I think that's just a catalyst for change, because it sort of has that trickle-down effect. So we might feel we're only one person, or we're too young, nobody cares, but look at what you've been able to accomplish just by, making those small steps. So I think that's really powerful. Do we have any other questions around the room? Yes, please. We have a question up here. Oh,
sorry.
Oh, we already have a microphone. Go ahead.
Sorry. Your video was amazing, very inspirational. You said that you've been doing this for almost 12 years now. And if there was any advice you can give to your younger self, what would that be? And what do you think are some areas that you can improve in then and even in the future?
Honestly, to my younger self, it really would have just be to keep your head up, because I do mention how bullying was a pretty predominant issue for me, and it did get very hard for me at times, and there was times where I felt like giving up, where I felt like, wow, I really can't do this is so hard, or that I felt like there were so many people who were against me rather than supporting me. And it gets extremely overwhelming, and I did almost give up at a point when I was much younger, and I didn't have that necessary mindset to keep going, and that necessarily strong mindset. But it really was it was really remembering, keeping myself grounded and remembering why I was doing it, for who I was doing it, and just remembering that I mentioned how children shouldn't have to know what it's not like to be able to drink their water. And for me, I was 8 years old when I discovered what a boil water advisory was. It wasn't in my community, but I was in another community, and my thought process was that there was children that were my age and younger who've never experienced what it's like to drink water from their taps. And that in itself was very saddening because we're in a first world country, we're considered a rich, privileged country, yet there's First Nations communities that are living in third world conditions. And so remembering why I'm doing what I'm doing and who I'm doing it for was so important. And of course, like the efforts to keep creating change. But yeah, I guess I would have told myself to keep my head up because it did get very hard at times. But yeah, just keeping yourself grounded.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. We're glad that you're here. We have a question right here up front.
Hi. So water is, so deeply important to just like everything on the planet. And it's an issue that has so many obstacles and is so big that often when I think of how just big and overwhelming it is, it's hard to even keep my emotions in check. So when you're out there dealing with so many people who have, the power to make decisions, but just sometimes aren't listening, like how do you sort through the emotions?
Well, it does become very stressful, and like in times like that, you may feel like you're not being heard. And that's kind of the importance of like consistency and like just consistently reminding people like about the problem, because you can't talk about it, make it known, and then nobody does anything about it. So the more that you talk about it and like the consistency that you keep up about talking about it, and like it doesn't necessarily have to be political figures, that's just like everyone in general, talking about it is so important. And like, yeah, just consistency and keeping talking about it is kind of what I think about when I kind of get discouraged by the fact that political figures won't listen. But yeah, the more you talk about it, the more likely changes to happen. It's kind of how I view it.
It's wonderful, thank you. I think also it's important to focus and center on our territorial relationships. So I think about that often. Being in the Haldimand Tract, our relationship is with the Grand River, and I often ask folks what their relationship is to the Grand River, how much time they spend there or engage with it. Being here on campus at the University of Waterloo, I often think about Laurel Creek running right through our campus. And for me, I think that's so beautiful to go out there and see that and visit with it. And I think often of the students who just kind of cross the bridge over the creek every day going to class and maybe don't think about that and how wonderful it is to be in relationship with that water on our territory right here on campus. So I think that's a piece of it too, is it does feel large and overwhelming, but can we bring that down and think about our territorial relationships and our connections? And as Autumn said, just make sure that we're talking about it and we're engaging with it and we're thinking about that relationship. It's a great question. I'm seeing a question over here.
Hi, thank you. So some people from my lab, we've been kind of discussing desire-based versus damage-based research. And I'm wondering if you have advice kind of, you mentioned about shifting from like a negative discourse to like positive discourse to elicit positive change. Do you have any advice for how to kind of shift that discourse from like that negative to the positive?
I feel like my advice would be like remembering and acknowledging what we do have rather than what we don't have. Because remember, like thinking about the fact that we have resilience and we have cultural representation, like my beaded earrings, or you see skirts in the room. It's like focusing on like the things that we do have rather than what we don't have is kind of how you shift from a negative to positive aspect and view. So that's kind of my answer to that.
Yeah, that's a great answer, and I think both in keeping with the theme of gratitude and the theme of, being in relationship to the water and in relationship to our communities, that's something I was thinking about a lot in coming into this morning is how do we have gratitude for the things that we don't take the time to acknowledge and take the time to be in relationship with. So I love your point about taking time to sort of visit your local bodies of water and to, visit the infrastructure that we have that enables us to have, clean drinking water in certain spaces, and, really take the time to have gratitude for the fact that we have this access, and then think about how can we advocate for the people in places who don't. I think we saw some more questions over here, just at the back first.
Hi there. Thank you so much for your beautiful film. I'm just wondering, can you share any pivotal moments in your journey so far where you felt like, yes, I am making impact? And have you noticed any changes as a result of your work so far?
I feel like the biggest change that I've noticed is the conversation revolving around Indigenous issues, because when I started, that was many years ago, and yes, our issues were talked about, but they weren't seen by outside the Indigenous community. Because yes, we talked about and acknowledged it within our people, but that's the only people who were listening. And so now, I guess 2024, our current generation, you see it being talked about a lot more. And I feel that my biggest accomplishments would be speaking at the United Nations and being able to speak at the World Economic Forum. And those are the biggest opportunities and the largest platforms that I've had to speak at. And I feel like that in itself is a reflection of how far you can really go. And because I started with something that was so simple by just speaking in my classroom with my peers in my Indigenous community. And I never really ever thought that I would be able to speak at the World Economic Forum or the United Nations. So that just reflects how far you can really go with it, and the change that has been created, because they went from not really being talked about outside the communities to being talked about on global stages and being talked about in a global aspect where not only Indigenous people know about it, all walks of life know about it. So I feel like that's kind of a reflection of the change. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that impact, and I think we all appreciate the way that you've become a voice for Indigenous communities in Canada. Thinking of myself, I have memories of my grandparents' home at Six Nations, which is, an hour south of here, and having to boil water in their home to be able to make tea and things like that. And that was just kind of part of the experience. But then being in a reserve community that's surrounded by places like, Hamilton and Brantford and places that have access to water, it's so interesting to think about, why not our community? And it's been an interesting shift to see it talked about a little bit more broadly and recognized outside of our own communities and to be seen by other people. So we all very much appreciate your work in bringing that forward, for sure. I think we saw some other folks with questions.
Hi, Autumn. You're an inspiration. Thank you so much. Many of us in this room are settlers, myself included, and I'm wondering how you think that settlers can offer more space and stand with activists who are Indigenous and be good allies, both kind of as settlers, as researchers, and as activists themselves. Thank you.
Well, I kind of mentioned how, being an ally, you're an ally through your actions and your behaviors. So taking that initiative to, let's just say, go to a First Nations community or experience these issues firsthand is how you can get the proper perspective and the proper education. Speaking with elders and speaking with Indigenous people directly from the community or people who are directly impacted by these problems is how you can get the proper awareness and proper education that you can help other people with. And so I guess my answer for that is just proper education and spreading properly making yourself aware.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And I think sometimes it's really uncomfortable entering those spaces of unknown or not having certain knowledge, and just getting familiar with being uncomfortable to be able to expand our awareness of the other's experience. I thought I saw a question over here. Do we have any more questions on this side? If not, we'll continue. Oh,
yeah, I have
hi.
one. Is this, okay, it is. Thank you. I really appreciate the video and your, decade plus of work to just kind of speaking for water. And also, thank you for spending the time and spending your energy to talk with us. A lot of your video, focused on talking to political leaders as well as large organizations, which is like definitely an important avenue to go down. I think at the same time, I don't know, maybe we're familiar with like the letdowns from like government organizations. You know, a really timely example is how the Auditor General found there was no significant improvements in, you know, housing on reserves from promises from 2015 from the Liberal government. So I'm wondering, you know, from your perspective of, you know, whether it's you yourself or your other activists, what do you think are other avenues that are maybe like good levers to pull so then, you know, we can have a or just like go down a bunch of different avenues to be able to enact change? Thank you.
Well, I feel I'm going to start this question by saying that, you know, we highlight that I've been speaking about these issues and been in these spaces for quite some time. And within those within that time and all the places and spaces that I've been included in, the most powerful voices and most powerful messages that I've heard came from youth and young people, because you generally wouldn't think that a young person would speak up about world or political issues or have the confidence to speak up to a political leader. But when someone who is young does, that reflects how much change there needs to be, and that reflects the significance of the problem. Because we shouldn't have to speak up, we shouldn't have to talk about these things, but we are. And so when a young person or a child speaks up, it's that much more powerful and it's that much more important. And we should listen just like that much more. And so, you know, that's why I strongly encourage young people to use their voices, because our voices are so much more powerful than we think that they are. And in terms of like how to speak to a political leader or someone in power, I don't really know. It just kind of happens, and I take whatever efforts, like writing letters. That's kind of really what I did to try and get my voice out there. And if I'm gonna be super real, speaking at the United Nations, I don't know how that happened. Because it's a really funny story, because my mom, she was going through her email one day, and this was like, it was just like a random time in the year. She's going through her email. It was her junk email, and she thought it was like spam. But it was like a full-on, like invitation from the president of the General Assembly. But it's like, I don't really know how that happened, but it just kind of happens. You just, you know, just actively using your voice. Just kind of, I guess that's how it happens, but yeah.
Hi, sorry. Thank you for your time. I was wondering, you were talking about how at age 8 you kind of learned about the Boyle Advisory. And I work with a lot of kids around that age, and you were talking about kind of the role that youth have in using their voices. I was wondering if you could speak maybe in your own experience about what have the adults around you done to help nourish your passion for water while also balancing like your age, you know, as a child, and the fact that, you know, you shouldn't have to be speaking up. And yeah.
Well, I feel the adults around me really just listened to what I had to say, and that's the importance of like youth voices, like, because you really just have to listen, you know, make them feel heard, listen to them, and, you know, support them in whatever action they feel like they need to take. And balancing my age, it was difficult. It was definitely difficult, and it did kind of like create those disparities from like other kids. But yeah, just being surrounded by good people and like being heard by adults was really, I guess, really how I balanced my age and like speaking about such important things. So yeah.
Hello. Thank you for all of your answers. So you talked a lot about how you've basically tried to enact change, obviously by speaking at the UN and even beyond. And I was wondering, so, you know, a lot of people have this impression of politicians, and I think it's true, that things don't really get done by them, and change is a very slow process there. And I think for all of us in this room, we want to enact change, and I think the vast majority of us, perhaps all of us but one, actually has any interest in even going all the way to the top. So I was wondering, like, from your perspective, in terms of actually creating change, is it something that the majority of us should be doing? Like, okay, obviously the majority should be doing it, but should we all be trying to make our voice heard, or should we be trying to make change kind of from the bottom up instead of top down, if that makes sense? I'd just be curious about your opinion on that.
I mean, everyone's like perspective of what they feel making change is going to be different. So like whether it's top down or bottom up, you know, it doesn't really matter. It's like as long as we're doing something and actively doing it is kind of like my advice. And with like government and politicians, with them it's really like one step forward, two steps back. And so it's like it's like something you have to be consistent with because they're also consistent with not keeping up. So it's like we have to keep up with them not keeping up. And so, yeah, it's really just like whether it's top down or bottom up, it's just like do your thing and just like, you know, keep doing it and stay consistent using your voice.
Thank you.
It's a great response. I think it's important also to think about your sphere of influence. We try and come from a relational framework, and so I think sometimes it's easy to remove the issues from ourselves by saying this is the responsibility of, you know, politicians. And I know there's a relationship there between a lot of these systems that we engage with and the institutions that we engage with. But we should also be thinking about like what is our kind of personal sphere of influence and the folks that we interact with. In our culture, we talk a lot about roles and responsibilities. So what are my responsibilities to my relationship with this territory, my relationship to these people? And I think it's important for non-Indigenous folks to think about that too. What is your territorial responsibility and what is your relational responsibility to this work, kind of connected to yourself? That's important also. Come back to our circle here.
Hello. Just seeing how successful that you have been as an activist and seeing like how successful you have been within your field of activism, I was wondering what skills or things that you have developed, either like behaviors or just people skills or social skills and whatnot, what do you feel has led you to more success in that field? Because if you're wanting to have an impact or have change, you need to have certain qualities or skills or behaviors or whatnot that help you move forward with that success. And I was just curious on what others or people could develop within themselves that could potentially help them in their successes as activists or people that want to challenge these dynamics and whatnot.
Well, I'll start that by saying going out of your comfort zone is so important because like you probably wouldn't be able to tell, but I am very nervous and I get very anxious and I actually have social anxiety. You wouldn't even think that. I used to actually cry before my speeches when I first started, like especially when I started speaking at like the Assembly First Nations and I was like 10 years old. I used to literally cry because I was so scared. And you know, it's really just going out of your comfort zone and challenging it and just going into those spaces, whether you're scared or not, is just, I guess, kind of how I defeated that. But I still get very nervous to this day, especially when it comes to like larger platforms. I was even nervous today to speak to everyone, but I guess you kind of just like learn how to like adapt to being nervous and like, I don't know, I don't want to say like hiding my emotions, but like, I guess that's kind of what I do. But yeah, just, I still get very nervous and it's not something that really went away, but it's just learned how to like adapt to it and just like be comfortable with everyone because everyone in here wants to hear what I have to say. You know, it's not like everyone's here with a negative, you know, perspective or wants to come at me. So it's just like remembering everyone here wants to hear what I have to say. And, you know, everyone here comes with a positive mind. And so just remembering that and again, remembering why I'm doing what I'm doing and who I'm doing it for is kind of what helped me like get through that barrier.
Yeah, that's something that I definitely lean on myself, and I think we connected about that before we started today, is that we were both very nervous to be here and to, you know, have this conversation with you all. But I've heard very often throughout my life, like, success is on the other side of fear. You know, you can picture that diagram, success here, fear here, making that trajectory. So it's a lot to bear, but I feel like when you lean into like your truth and your community and you have that like grounding factor around you, it's really strong. We have another question here.
Definitely relate to the nervousness thing. So it's funny that you mentioned like policy people. Being honest, I work for the government in environmental policy. And as an Indigenous person myself, like wondering what has your experience been like, kind of balancing or bridging like Indigenous knowledges in Western dominated spaces and kind of getting that knowledge to, I guess, yeah, like government officials and like politicians and stuff, because that's something I know I definitely struggle with. So yeah.
Well, I mean, I kind of just like I share whatever I know, and it's like to the best of my abilities because I'm only 19 years old, and of course I don't really know everything. I'm not like this like super special elder, so it's like sharing what I know is so important, and like ensuring that what I'm sharing is accurate and reliable, and like ensuring that where I get my information is from someone who's like an elder or from like spaces that like are appropriate. So just making sure that I'm like sharing the accurate information from like reliable people is kind of like how I bring that information to those spaces. And it's like, just as long as I know that what I'm sharing is positive with positive intention is just how I go in. And like, I guess that's really how I manage it.
Thank you.
I think that framing is so important around the positivity. And I also think when we're talking about knowledge sharing, I work here at the university in the Faculty of Science, which is often not the first place that folks think about Indigenous knowledge being present, but really demonstrating that at the heart of science is curiosity, and that science is a relational endeavor. And so where can we find that similarity between ourselves culturally and knowledge and the way that we share it? I think it's also important to emphasize that the folks that you're engaging with need to be willing to listen. We're definitely a storytelling narrative people, and the way that we do things often takes a bit more time than institutions are familiar or comfortable with. And so I think that's a piece too, is sometimes teaching that protocol and that relationship and responsibility is so important too. So thank you. We have a question here from my cousin from Six Nations.
Hi, Autumn. My name is Jay Havens. I'm a educator here at the university in the theater department. I just want to thank you for your work. You can really tell you're carrying a lot of power from your aunt, and she'd be very proud of you if you're here, for you being here and carrying on all this work. I kind of want to, a question that's been stirring in my brain was that day that you went to talk to the Economic Forum. And the film kind of reflects like you gearing up for that, and then we get a little snippet of your speech, and it's such a beautiful film. I'm curious to know what happened after that, like just like immediately after, or like maybe during that forum. Did you have any immediate responses from the people in the room, and what were those responses? And like, did you see any initiatives kind of take place, or like, sometimes we talk about that metaphor of like we're the drop in the water, and that the ripples that we create are where the real change happens. So I'm just curious from that interaction, since that was your second time there too, if there were like people you saw like a couple of times, and those relationships that were formed, and yeah, just kind of to bring it right back down from kind of the big picture stuff. Like, was there anyone in specific or any memory you have of like immediately after or something? Yeah, thank you.
Well, immediately after I spoke, there was actually a few different like political leaders from like all over the world who kind of came to like greet me and thank me for like my words. And the first person who actually came up to me was the Deputy Prime Minister of Canada. And what she had did was, of course, thank me for my speech and what I had to say. And she actually brought me to go and sit where Canada sits at the United Nations. So I got to sit where everyone sits Canada sits there, and that's kind of like what her response was like helping me like experience that and like share those experiences. And it was really just feedback, and like most of the time feedback that I get is really like, oh wow, like I didn't even know that was an issue. And like not even just from like political leaders, but even my peers, like friends I meet at school or friends I meet in like my common spaces, it's really like people don't really know that this is happening in Canada. And it's like, that just goes to show how much is not talked about, how much attention isn't shown to these issues, and like how swept under the carpet they are and how hidden they are, because these things are most definitely happening. And like that just goes to reflect like Canada's efforts to make change, because people don't even know that this is happening. And it's like our people are living in third world conditions in a first world country, and people don't even know about that. It's hidden. And so that just like goes to show the importance of like talking about it, and talking about it in whether like all spaces, whether it's big or small. And so, yeah, the feedback is really like, oh, wow, like, I didn't even know that was an issue, or like, well, okay, well, I'm going to start talking about that now. And so that's kind of what I get from it. It's just like support and like positive feedback.
Thank you. Are those efforts still ongoing? Like now that that forum is, like that was a number of years ago and we're back in our country now. So you're I forget your title, you're the water commissioner. So is that like an official position on your res where you're like looking after the water resources and initiatives on the reserve? Or do you like mostly go as like an ambassador type role and you're still kind of advocating in Ottawa and things? I'm just curious.
Well, I'm the Chief Water Commissioner for Anishinaabeg Nation, which means like all communities surrounding the Great Lakes and like any community that falls under the Anishinaabeg Nation. And really what my role is to be an ambassador and be an advocate for my people and bring thoughts and opinions from community members to larger tables and larger discussions. So yeah, like my role really is just, to keep being an advocate and keep using my voice and help other people use their voices as well.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that. That's I'm definitely in awe of your courage and your strength. I think we saw another question over here.
Hi, thank you for being here and talking to us. You just mentioned that you're an ambassador for your community and for your nation. I wanted to know, how do you go about collecting those opinions and having those conversations in these communities?
Well, that would be like being engaged in community, like just anything that really has to involve like people, like even stuff like this. Like I take like really like any opinions and thoughts about water and like how people feel about it, and I bring that to the table and make that known. And that doesn't necessarily have to be only in Indigenous communities, but that's like anyone, even from these spaces. So really just like attending like things like this is kind of how I guess collect that information and collect those perspectives.
Hello. Oh, I think I just turned it off. Oh, maybe this is not working. Okay. Anyways, you mentioned that you were a student, and I was just kind of curious on how you balance student and being in an institution that demands a lot of attention, and that is like a very Western institution, and how you balance that and also being an advocate, and how you balance that and being an ambassador, like not only time-wise but emotionally and spiritually.
Well, it is pretty hard to be a full-time student and also like balance like this because it does demand a lot of my time. And like even now I'm missing school to be here, and it does get very hard. And at times I do fall behind a bit, I can't lie, and it's very hard to keep up at times, but I don't really know how I balance it. I just kind of do it. Like I'm just like ensure that I'm like doing my work while I'm traveling whenever I can, whenever I have spare time. But yeah, just I don't really know. I just kind of do it. It just kind of like becomes like something I do. I don't know. It's just kind of like all like tied into one. It's just because like one day I'm like doing advocacy, but I'm also studying at the same time. It's just kind of like finding a way to incorporate everything into one thing is kind of how I do it. But it does become very difficult at times.
Thank you for sharing that. I think you were sharing earlier, Autumn, this is your first year, which, as many of us know, the first year of undergrad can often be a very daunting experience, but also a learning experience in terms of trying to figure out what balance looks like. And that's, a process and part of the journey for sure. And so thank you for sharing that experience. Gonna go back around the circle. Let's see if we have questions here. Oh, we have a question back here. We just have to turn the mic on. Thanks to our wonderful AV folks for helping us coordinate this today.
I got this one. Thanks so much. I had the privilege of getting to hear from your grandmother, Josephine, about some of her stories around walking around the Great Lakes to raise awareness and praise the water. I found that a really inspiring story. She was, for me to walk a couple kilometers is a lot, and she did a lot of work for water. And I'm wondering, how did she inspire you what kind of messages have you taken from her and are carrying on? I know we heard a little bit about it in the film, but wondering if you'd like to expand on any of that.
Well, she's the one who kind of like helped me understand and like gain the knowledge that I have about the importance and sacredness of water from in like an Indigenous and ceremonial perspective. That's kind of where I grew that understanding and respect for it. And I did a lot of like work alongside with her, and she included me in a lot of her spaces. So I was able to kind of see her advocacy and her thoughts and perspectives firsthand. And yeah, she's the one who kind of helped me like gain that like respect and understanding of it. And like seeing her age is what really like encouraged me to use my voice, because I seen how hard it got for her and how like much more difficult it was for her to attend all of these spaces and be involved. And so I started to think about like, well, once she can't do it, or once she's not here, who's going to do it, you know? So it was kind of like, it was inspiring for her to like kind of like teach me that and be able to like see what that looks like to understand and respect it in such a way. And I like do acknowledge like that's her way of like expressing her advocacy through water walks and ceremonies, her way of like expressing her advocacy, but she's who helped me like understand and like develop what advocacy looked like for me. And so I do acknowledge that she's the one who helped me like, you know, develop my own way of advocacy and how I express that.
That's wonderful, thank you. We have a question up here. So I'll bring you the mic.
Scano, it's really great for you to be here. I'm really, really honored. I had a kind of a strange question. As somebody who's prominent in mainstream, how do you go about navigating cultural knowledge? So like as more people want to know about cultural knowledge, I'm just wondering, do you have a line at like, there's only specific knowledges that I can share with the mainstream, or there's certain stories that I like to keep for myself, or things like that as you like develop and create content, things like that. So I'm just wondering on your perspective on that. Yeah.
Yes, well, there is a barrier that I do identify as like what I can share and what I don't share, because there is certain things that do stay in certain spaces, and there is an appropriate level of what I do share with the public. So yes, there is that barrier.
Thank you. Yeah, I think about that in terms of our, you know, ceremonies and being in Longhouse, and what happens in the Longhouse stays in the Longhouse. But I think it's difficult when folks are kind of asking for Indigenous knowledge and ceremony and understanding, and not always recognizing the sacredness of some of our knowledge and the fact that it needs to stay in certain places, and that that's not necessarily for everyone. And I think that's sometimes a difficult path to walk when folks who are not from our communities kind of have expectations of wanting to understand or wanting to learn. And so I think it's helpful when non-Indigenous folks kind of respect that there is a line for us and our communities and our knowledge and what we share. It's a beautiful question, Yawa.
Hi, so as many of us here are Indigenous students at UW, I know for myself as a first generation student, in being in a space that traditionally we were not meant to be in, it's been very interesting navigating this. And so as someone who is in university as an Indigenous student, is there any sort of advice or any knowledge you would like to share with any sort of Indigenous youth who are thinking about going to post-secondary and coming into these spaces?
Yes, well, it's also very new to me as I'm a first year. I did go to college prior to this, but this is my first year in university, and I mean, I just like to acknowledge like the importance of like Indigenous people being in colonial spaces, because it is so important. Like we also all do have the capability to be in those spaces, so you know, dominating those spaces is so important. And you know, just going to school and being in those spaces is like also what encourages me to stay in them, because you know, just being in the environment alone is also so empowering, and knowing that I do also have the capabilities to do the same things is so empowering. And I honestly like I didn't really think that I could at one point, and I did feel very discouraged to go to school. And just like being in those spaces would help me, like even though I was uncomfortable, just putting myself in that space, and I do acknowledge like the importance of going outside of your comfort zone is what helps me become comfortable. So yeah, just exposing yourself to that exposure is so important.
I think you make a good point about, representation and occupying spaces where traditionally folks have been excluded, and just how showing up can enable someone else to do the same. And I think that's really, really powerful and really insightful. So thank you for that. Do we have any more questions around the room? Oh, over here.
Hi, so first of all, thank you so much. Like, your journey is so inspirational. And the thing, like, few minutes ago, you just mentioned that how people are unaware of the issues happening. But from my perspective, like, some people, like, majority are aware, but still reluctant to change their way of unsustainable actions. Like, for example, when I talk with my family, friends, they know the issues, but they are not, like, sometimes I feel like they are reluctant to change their way of life. So what's your take on that? I would like to hear. How to deal with such people?
Well, my take on that would really to be, surround yourself in spaces where people do know the answers and people do know like the correct knowledge. So like how I mentioned, like visiting a First Nations community and like, talking with Indigenous people is how you can get the correct, accurate information and like the proper knowledge. So yeah, just like surrounding yourself in spaces where people do know the answers is really important. Like this is, a space where you can do exactly that. So doing things like this is, your first step at understanding and having a better understanding.
Thank you. I think we have time for a couple more questions. Seeing one there.
Hello. Great to meet you. I think my question is, how do you deal with, especially having been an activist since you were 8 years old, and being in spaces where you have to keep repeating yourself the same story over and over again over the 12 years, and maybe there has been a little bit of progress, but not enough, for the day and age that we live in. How do you kind of keep yourself optimistic? That would be one part of my question. And the other is, given you've been doing this for so long, since 8, it doesn't have to be so, but have you ever felt like, being a voice and carrying this burden, do you feel like you've ever lost a bit of your childhood?
I do feel that way in a sense, but I tend to try and look at it in a positive way because, I look back at my childhood and I think about who I was inspiring. And I spoke at a lot, I do still speak, but I spoke at a lot of schools, and that's like young kids, like kindergarten, grade 5, 6, young kids. And so that's kind of what helps me stay optimistic because we also talk about how like it becomes very hard for me at times and how I feel like giving up. But like remembering like who I'm doing it for and like who I'm a role model for is kind of what helps me like stay optimistic. And when I felt like giving up, I thought about, well, what type of role model would I be if I let people get to me? What type of role model would I be for these young kids who are looking up to me if I was to just stop? So it's like being a positive role model is kind of what helps me stay optimistic and like thinking about who I'm inspiring and thinking about who is being affected and impacted by my work.
Thank you. We have a question here.
Have you ever found yourself getting upset with anybody at the United Nations in the room or getting into an argument?
I haven't gotten into an argument, but I do tend to have very like a lot of emotions, but it's a matter of being able to like control what I say and like control the situation in an appropriate manner because of course these things can become very upsetting, and I feel like emotions of like anger, frustration, stress, and even sadness. And so just being able to like express those feelings in an appropriate way with like the proper words is kind of how I manage and mitigate it because sometimes my thoughts may not be necessarily like positive words, so being able to just say that in a respectful manner is kind of how I manage a situation where an argument might result. Yes.
Thank you. I think we saw a question here as well of our microphone guest. Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. Oops, is this on? Hello? Oh, hi. I am Haudenosaunee, and I'm an elementary educator. Funny how you mentioned the children, because you see, the only reason I am inspired, and I get emotional too, and I don't apologize. So some of the things that I want to remind us of is the fact that we often talk about knowledge, and yet we all have that knowledge within us, right? And it's the children. The reason I'm inspired is because I hang out with the children, and they actually are the future. And I spoke with our elected chief yesterday, and I'm on fire to bring our community of Six Nations together, and I said, we're not going to do it with the adults. We're going to do it with the children. And so that's the way we will. And when the children can share their voices, when they can create images, and when, because they know, and I know they know because I teach in Circle, and they teach me every day. So when we invite their voices and when we invite their perspective, and then we'll invite the adults to say, what can we learn? What are they telling us? Because truly, it's the children and Mother Earth and the water that are within that circle. And when we put it in that perspective, we really can't, there's really no argument, right? So that's what I've learned. And so I truly appreciate all that you've done. We've had you online with some of our teachers, and just a reminder that we're in an academic institution, but we were put in these places, and Mother Earth, she is our greatest teacher. Yeah.
I often talk about how, exactly like you said, it's the young kids who are the most impactful and have the most to say and have the best thoughts, because that's kind of where it starts. That's where development and learning starts. And I often advocate for incorporating Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous perspectives into the education and curriculum system, because that's where you really start developing that mindset and learning, because it's harder to kind of change the minds of adults who are already developed and have developed their own thoughts and opinions, however from whoever. But that's kind of, I also talk about this. That's a really good point, because I advocate for putting Indigenous knowledge and perspectives into the curriculum system.
Yeah, thank you. I think we are almost at time, and having that kind of beautiful reflection on the education system, the institution that we're in, and where we can bring this knowledge in is maybe a good place to pause our conversation. I won't say stop our conversation, but we want to extend our thanks and our gratitude to Autumn and to her family for coming to visit on our territory today.